Welcome to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast.
Welcome back to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. I'm Don Shelley, your host. Today on the show, we're going to do something that's a little bit different, and I hope something that becomes actually an important part of what we do here on A Fork in Time. As you know, most of the time we explore a particular historical what-if, looking at the alternate history that would flow from that fork in time, hence the name of the podcast, and looking at the alternate history of the counterfactual scenario around whatever the particular event might be. We're going to continue to do that. That is the primary focus, the primary format of the show, so that's not going to change. But as we've mentioned a number of times as the podcast has been evolving during its first year here, one of the things that we look to do here on A Fork in Time is actually build a community, a place where those who share an interest like we do in real history and looking at real history through the idea of alternate history can come together for entertainment, but also to exchange ideas. And as you know already on the show, we've had those who have found the podcast who have actually come and joined us to be guests or guest hosts on the show, and we look to do a lot more of that. In fact, if you're listening to the podcast, that's something that's of interest to you, we've encouraged you to give us feedback and participate that way. We're serious about that. We actually think our shows are better when it's not a solo show that's either done by Alexis or myself, and when we engage other folks who have an interest in this same type of topic, and we get a wider variety of ideas that are flowing with that. So that's an important part of what we want to foster and develop here on A Fork in Time. The other thing that we've mentioned a number of times is that both myself and others who I think have found the podcast have been influenced by really writers and thinkers in the area of alternate history. There are a number of authors who have been quite successful and quite effective in the alternate history science fiction genre. And they are the inspiration for this show, and they also are the catalyst for the types of thinking that we look to do here. So to accomplish that task, what I would like to do here today on the episode is lay out the mechanism for something new that we're going to try. And like so many things as we're in the first year of the podcast here, it's about trying and seeing what will work. And I think that if this is successful, we can continue to do it, and I think it will actually add both variety to the podcast as well as expose us to an entire new audience that will help the audience grow. And so the concept is really pretty simple. What we're looking for is feedback directly from our listeners. And so if you haven't visited our website, strongly encourage you to do so. That's www.aforkintimepodcast.com. And one of the things that we'll be adding to the website is a new area that'll be very visible there when you land on the landing page. And this is actually to provide feedback on particularly science fiction alternate history authors. And so this is what I would like to do. If you would either submit an email or in writing on the form that's placed there, who your favorite alternate history writer is, their favorite book, and just whatever comments that you have about them. What we'd like to do is we'd like to compile together a series of shows where we focus on individual writers. For example, I'll use the first writer that I would like to focus on. Some of you may be familiar with him. That's Harry Turtledove. Actually, I think the first alternate history novel that I ever read was his Guns of the South. And as you know, Turtledove is one of the most prolific writers when it comes to alternate history. And so, for example, if you have read any of Harry Turtledove's books, his series, he's a very prolific writer, so he has a lot of works out there, and I'm assuming that if you're listening to this podcast, you're not only familiar with him, but that you have experience with maybe some of his favorites. You may also be a critic of his. You may not like some of his writings. Whatever that situation is with you and Harry Turtledove, we'd like to encourage you to go to the website and submit back to us a little bit about your thoughts about him as a writer. And so you can do that in writing by completing the form there, and we'll incorporate that. Or if you'd like to send us an email with an audio snippet, I'd love to have audio clips that we can put into a future episode. Once we've had a couple of weeks to compile those episodes, we'll remind you about that on coming podcast episodes. What we'll do is we'll put together a compilation podcast that sort of features Harry Turtledove and features some of the feedback from our listeners, from those who have read him, sort of an opportunity to expose each other to what we think about him, and maybe those who have not read his works, give them some good ideas about where to start. So as you can see, the concept here is for me to throw out a suggestion for a particular author or a title, and then for our listeners and our audience to provide feedback in such a way that that will actually feed a future episode that centers around that particular writer. So it may be that someone out there that's in our listening community is so much a fan of his they would love to actually be on a show where we talk about his books and their favorites. That's something that we're open to. Again, our experience so far has been that the podcast is better when we spread out to incorporate the thoughts and the participation of others. And so this is just another way for us to do that. We're going to refer to this particular process as our fiction focus. So when you go to the website, www.aforkintimepodcast.com, you're going to see a large button at the top of each page, which will connect you to the fiction focus section of the website. You can also find it through the drop-down menus. Of course, there'll be a link in the show notes as well. So at the fiction focus, you'll have a couple of different ways to provide some feedback on the author or the book topic or whatever particular work of alternate history fiction that we are focusing on. You'll see the options there under the fiction focus section on the website for how you can provide that feedback. And again, that can range from just some written feedback, maybe some reviews or some commentary. It could be an audio file that you may send or upload to us. It could be a request to actually be on the show where we focus on that particular author, on that particular work. So there'll be a number of different ways to participate based upon what you're most comfortable with, what you have the time to be able to do. But again, the idea here is to continue to grow the community around what inspired me to want to have the podcast in the first place, which were some of the great writers and fiction pieces that I've read that are all around the concept of alternate history and the ideas of counterfactuals. In fact, speaking of alternate history fiction, this is an opportunity also for us to once again introduce one of the neat new things that we're excited about here on A Fork in Time, and that's the relationship that we forged with Audible and becoming a partner with them that can benefit both our listeners as well as benefit the podcast. As many of you may know, Audible is one of the leading suppliers. In fact, I think it is the best supplier of audio program content. Certainly that includes audiobooks, but Audible has a lot of other content as well. And what we've done here on A Fork in Time is we've made an arrangement with Audible that allows our listeners to benefit the podcast and at the same time do a free trial of Audible to see if it's something that works for them. And so one of the cool things about Audible is it works on all types of smart devices, smartphones. You can play back using your computer. So a number of different platforms that allow you to access audio material. And that includes well over 100,000 books. These are well done, professionally narrated books. And for example, the particular topic of our upcoming fiction focus that I've mentioned here, Harry Turtledove, a number of Turtledove's books are available on Audible for your listen. These are unabridged, well-narrated versions of his books. And so if you'd like to take advantage of the offer that we've arranged for our listeners, it's very simple to do. All you have to do is go to Audible Trial, Trial, so Audible Trial, audibletrial.com/aforkintime. And what you can do there is you can get a 30-day free trial membership to Audible that will allow you access to one free audio program. So for example, maybe you've never read any of Harry Turtledove's works of fiction, for example, like Guns of the South that I mentioned, which was one of my first exposures to Harry Turtledove and also to the world of alternate history fiction. But you, for example, could go and you could download that Audible program for free. And for 30 days, do a listen to that and see what Audible is all about, which I think you'll enjoy, but also see what that particular author is all about. So if you'd like to take advantage of the free offer, doesn't have to be the Turtledove book, could be any among the hundreds of thousands of audio titles that exist at Audible. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/aforkintime and just follow the instructions there. Yeah, you'll get the free audio download. We'll get the benefit of having sent you that way, so it's a win-win. So, again, as I conclude out the episode here, just to remind you to participate, if you would, in this interactive process that we're looking to start now, which we're calling our Fiction Focus. Again, go to www.aforkintimepodcast.com. You'll see the button there, the link there that'll take you to the Fiction Focus page, and you can see how you can participate and be part of that. Of course, there are a number of other ways that you can interact and participate and support the podcast. One of those ways is by leaving ratings or reviews on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or any of the other podcatcher platforms, the places that you get your podcast. It certainly helps us inside of those to be noticed in those search engines to allow other listeners to find us. So if you enjoy the show, certainly feel free to go and give us a positive rating and give us a positive review there. It'll help the podcast a great deal. One of the other things that you can do, of course, is participate on social media, share information about the show. If you go to our website, you'll see the access there to how to post and do things on our Facebook page, on Twitter, or other social media so you can get the word out. Obviously, you can always just tell somebody, talk to somebody, hey, that face-to-face conversation. We can actually still do that. That's still actually being social without being social media. And, of course, if you do find the podcast of interest and you're able to and want to, the opportunity exists. You can find that on our website or on our Patreon page for how you can support the podcast and help defray some of the cost of actually hosting and producing the podcast. We're not in this to make money, but it is helpful to have the cost taken care of and allow our listeners to participate in that. We appreciate that. But as we always say on each of the episodes, as we talk about the ways that you can support the podcast, one of the best ways that you actually support the podcast is by giving us your time and attention. If you aren't already a subscriber to the podcast so that you automatically get the download each time a new episode is published, certainly would encourage you to do that. That way you don't miss any episodes. One of the things that I'm most proud of here at this point of the podcast is that we've consistently produced episodes every week. That's something that we strive to do. That may seem like an easy enough thing to do, but since this is not what I do full-time or what Alexis does full-time, it is a challenge sometimes to make sure that we have content, and we want to have good content. In fact, that's one of the reasons that we're doing this particular initiative, and some of the other things that we have done is seeking out just better ways to not only make content, but have it be meaningful and exciting and interesting content as well. And we know that one of the best ways that that can happen is by reaching out to our audience. And so again, I want to thank you again for joining us today. We will have an episode next week where we return back to our normal format of looking at a particular event and how changing that event could change history, the traditional way that we look at things here on A Fork in Time. Until then, I hope that you have a great week. And again, thanks for listening. We appreciate you. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. Learn more about the podcast at www.aforkintimepodcast.com. Join us next time.